I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation is a man named Sean Finnegan and his much younger, 30 years younger, fiancée, Rebecca Dishman. Now, this story involves conduct and allegations that are deplorable. They are disgusting. They are absolutely horrific. This is stuff that even the most hardened true crime follower might find difficult. You've been warned. Here's the story. Oak Ridge, Tennessee is a relatively small community of about 30,000 in the eastern part of the state near Knoxville. Oak Ridge was built under a cloak of secrecy by the United States government during World War II as a major site for the Manhattan Project, the massive wartime effort that produced the world's first atomic weapon. And prosecutors say there was another fatal secret being kept in Oak Ridge in December of 2019. This man, Sean Finnegan, along with his much younger fiancée, Rebecca Dishman, abducted a young woman named Jennifer Paxton. And while in captivity, they allegedly chained her up, sexually abused and tortured her over the course of days. Eventually, she was murdered and mutilated, dismembered and placed into a stand-up freezer for months. The darkness of this tale is extreme. The allegations absolutely horrid. But just who was responsible for what happened? Was it Rebecca Dishman who told the jury it was Finnegan? Or Finnegan who told investigators it was Dishman? Who's telling the truth about the tragic death of Jennifer Paxton? One house, two people alive, one person dead inside the house. The facts are what they are. And what was found inside was extremely disturbing. So both of these individuals, this couple, spoke. I want you to take a listen to Sean Finnegan when he spoke to investigators, giving his side of the story of what happened behind those walls.
One night I brought this girl home for all of us to have fun. She took a shower, came downstairs. I went upstairs to go take a piss. When I came back down, she hit her. She is not all there, really. She's bipolar, schizophrenia, depression, all that. So I guess maybe she had a blackout moment or whatever. She hit her with a baseball bat. And I freaked out. I didn't know what to do. She was still alive at that point. So we brought her upstairs and tried to clean her up. And I went to work the next day. When I came home, she strangled her. And the only thing I could do was I freaked out. I rented a freezer and I put her in the freezer. I didn't know what to do with her. I mean, I don't know. Like I said, I went to work. When I came home, she was dead. And I didn't know what to do. And I was like, Rebecca, what did you do? She's like, I just flipped out. I loved her and I covered it up for her. I knew it was going to come back. Where's she at? Where's she at? I don't know where she's at. She's the one who did it, not me. I just tried to cover it up for her. I mean, if I did it, I mean, how do you live with someone that did it for 9 months? You know what I'm saying? And we slept in a bed. I didn't do it.
He's denying it. He's pointing the finger at his girlfriend, fiancé, roommate, whatever you want to call her. So that brings me to our first question, and it's a simple one. The answer might not be that simple, but the question is pretty simple. Is he telling the truth? is Sean Finnegan telling the truth about what happened inside that house and who was really responsible for the murder. Let me bring in my guests, my experts. Joining me tonight, clinical and forensic psychologist, researcher and expert on violent crime, and author of the book, The New Evil, Dr. Gary Brucato is with me. Also joining me, body language expert and author of the New York Times best-selling book, You Can't Lie to Me, Janine Driver is with us as well. Great to see you both. Janine, let me begin with you. What did you see from this man in the interview/interrogation room with investigators?
Now, it's tough because we don't have his baseline, Vinny, and we always want to get someone's baseline ideally when we can. Here we don't have it, but I will say it's almost as if he's not breathing. He's very stiff. Now, keep in mind he has handcuffs on, but his shoulders are up. And what happens when people are stop breathing and their shoulders are up? It's like they don't want to let you in on the truth. He also is looking down left. Down left is internal dialogue. So he's not looking down right, which would be emotions. So this is indicative to me of someone who's making up a story. Now, of course, he does lean in at some point where he says she was dead and he came home. There was a change in that posturing there. But here's the deal. When someone is authentic, Vinny, and you at home, we're looking for PGMs, posture, gesture, merger. It means even if he has handcuffs on, when he's telling the story, his body language and his body's going to shift. When we see this frozen stance, this fight, flight, or freeze, and the freeze is happening, it's often someone who's holding back the truth. And here's the most important part, Vinny. Most important. If I did it, he said. Didn't O.J. Simpson write a book? If I did it, this is how it would have went down. When people say this, their message is actually in the words that people use. This is what we call an indirect confession in the detecting deception world. If I did it, a truthful person would never say that. Right? A truthful person would never say, if I slaughtered and killed and raped this person, if I did it. Why would my fiance or my girlfriend sleep in bed with me for the next 9 months? Well, you're sleeping in bed with her. And you're saying she did it. So if I did it as an embedded command, right there is a truthful statement hidden among other words.
Dr. Gary Brucato. Yep. I want to play for you another part of the interview, and it seems that he may be caught in a little bit of a lie right here. Let's watch.
One of the things that I've studied is forensics on bodies, and I've done it for years, and I understand that. This girl was hit, and she lived for several days, so you didn't just go to work one day. No, I'm not saying work one day. I'm just saying I came home from work, and she was dead. But how many days was she in the bedroom where she was injured? 4 days. My ex did it when I was upstairs. I didn't touch her. Tied up. And she was tied up, yes, because I didn't want her to get out because of everything that happened. I was just trying to nurse her back to health. But my girl got mad again and just took it out on her. The whole thing was just to have a threesome. That's all it was, and send her on her way. That's all it was. But it didn't end up that way.
So it seemed he didn't necessarily come clean initially with the amount of time that Jennifer Paxton was there. Dr. Gary Brucato, what are you seeing from Sean Finnegan in this interview room? I think we have a problem with the audio. Are we muted?
Here I am.
Gotcha.
Sorry about that. No, I said, I think what you're seeing here is a microcosm of what probably went on in this individual's relationships generally, which is where truth is simply used as it's made up as one goes along, let's put it that way, with the goal being of essentially manipulating a person into believing or doing whatever it is that you want. When a person confronts you with a piece of information that doesn't match, you simply change it, assume they're an idiot and are going to believe you. But the goal is essentially to shepherd or herd a person toward whatever it is you want them to do or say. You also see a total objectification of women, for example, referring to his supposed significant other as my girl, and talking as if, she was motivated by being so infatuated with him that she couldn't control herself and had to kill another individual to knock another woman out of the way. But the idea is it doesn't even seem to occur to him that this woman might wind up, for example, if anybody were to believe him, incarcerated for the rest of her life, possibly even with a death sentence, if somebody would believe, and he couldn't care less as long as he were able to slip the hook. And so I think that's what we have to understand is total objectification, no interest whatsoever in the feelings of other human beings, particularly women. There seems to be an utter misogyny there, and a total control freak.
Well stated. Well stated. Okay, let's do this. Our guests will stay with us. When we come back, we'll take a look at Rebecca Dishman. Is she telling the truth?
Sean later came in and introduced us together. She made breakfast and asked to take a shower, and once she went to go take a shower, Sean asked me, "Do you want to kidnap her?"
Don't let them base their entire case, which they have, on Rebecca Dishman and the fact that they're trying to tell you that she's incapable of lying. The fact that the DA just stood up here and said that Rebecca Dishman is incapable of lying should give you pause. That's a bold statement to make about their witness, isn't it? I mean, I've heard about bolstering witnesses, but my witness can't lie. Wow. So your first-degree murderer, rapist, kidnapper doesn't have the ability to lie.
Rebecca Dishman's testimony crucial in this case. It was also, at times, difficult to watch based upon what she was saying. Now, she's in the house, she is with him, and she's engaging in a lot of conduct. So I want you to take a listen to Rebecca Dishman. This is the key witness, the one who's inside the house telling the jury, telling the world what happened to Jennifer Paxton.
Could you tell us about what happened when Jennifer came in?
She came in and I was putting the bed up, and I was confused because I didn't know the woman, and Sean later came in and introduced us together. She made breakfast and asked to take a shower, and once she went to go take a shower, Sean asked me, "Do you want to kidnap her?" She ate breakfast and we were talking, and after she ate breakfast, he walked her over towards the back door and was showing her a baseball bat. And then he started hitting her over the head. And I went into shock, and he yelled at me to go upstairs. And I came in, and he told me to lock the door. And as I walked in, he was straddled over her, strangling her with a shoestring, and told me to help him. And I just shut down and sat on the bed and just gave up.
What finally concluded this episode?
He went to empty the ashtray, and she was taking her last breath, and I got on my hands and knees and told her goodbye because I knew she was dying. And he came back inside and slapped me across the face.
Before she's put in the freezer, could you walk us through again the process before putting her in the freezer the first time?
When we put her in the freezer, Sean was in front of her and I was behind her. And he forced her body to go inside of the freezer, and she made a noise, like snapping noise, and blood went on me, and it freaked me out.
So in her testimony, you get the feeling that she's not really involved in what's happening, that she is also a victim of Sean Finnegan in all of this. You know, and she's being sympathetic to Jennifer Paxton. So that brings me to my next question about Rebecca Dishman. It's an important one. Significant. Is she telling the truth? Is she telling the truth about what happened behind those walls? Let's bring back in our guests still with us, Dr. Gary Brucato and Janine Driver. Dr. Gary Brucato, I'll begin with you. What are you seeing and hearing from her? Because it seems like she is speaking as if she is a victim of Sean Finnegan as well.
Well, it's a surprise to a lot of people that offenders of the type that Sean Finnegan is accused of being have partners and accomplices, sometimes in some studies as much as 20% of the time. What's interesting about it is that when it's a male-female pairing, usually what you see is the female is a highly dependent individual, sometimes has history of abuse, becomes involved with this individual they become very afraid of, and are sometimes so frightened for their lives that they develop what might be called a kind of Stockholm syndrome, where they can participate in things out of a terrible fear that some horrible thing is going to happen to them. Individuals like that can often be weaker-willed. They can sometimes have intellectual disabilities. But the idea is that they are totally and completely being dominated by a person who's frightening them. What we see in individuals like that when they present and talk about the case is that they often are very flat and affectless, like you see in people who are traumatized. You get a sense of a kind of dissociation. And the individual is going to describe in a very matter-of-fact manner completely horrible things because they've adapted to having to see those things in a given setting. What I'm seeing is an individual that I think plausibly has herself been victimized in that sense. However, it is important to understand that if an individual is actually engaging in offenses along with somebody else, you know, we have to take that into consideration. So we don't want to paint the picture of an individual as being, you know, a kind of marionette that is going along purely for that reason. However, it does figure into the story often.
Janine Driver, what did you see?
Listen, all day long, I believe her. She's looking down right. I just said this about Finnegan, right? He was looking down left, which is internal dialogue. She's looking emotionally. We see sadness in the dimpling of her chin a couple times. That's a hard one to fake, right? So we can fake sadness a little bit, but I'm not really getting that dimpling of the chin that we see. I agree, too, with your other guest about that lack of affect. Look at her posture, Vinnie, and you at home. These shoulders pulled forward. We often see this with victims, and I love that she's wearing a striped shirt because I can see the PGMs, the posture gesture merger. If you look at the stripes, you can see as she's talking, they're subtly moving. This is an indicator of someone being forthright and truthful. And here's what else I want to say, Vinnie, is we don't see the sadness in the forehead, which we would see if there was grief. And so it makes sense that someone has been battered herself or abused herself. Here's the linchpin. Here's the smoking gun. She says, Sean asked me, past tense, do you want to kidnap her? He walked her. He started hitting her. I sat on the bed. He told me to lock the door. Everything she's saying is past tense, and this is indicative of someone who is telling the truth. She's also giving us lots of details. If I'm a director of a movie, I can make the movie based on what she's saying, not the mumbo jumbo we hear Finnegan saying, right? So I sat on the bed, and she said, I got on my hands and knees and said goodbye to her. Again, we have that movement in her body. She's saying, and then she says, he saw it, and he slapped me across the face. He forced her. All this, it's congruent with someone who is indicative of telling the truth. I believe her. If I was a betting woman, which I'm not, I'd put my money this woman here is telling the truth, Rebecca Dishman.
I want to show both of you and the folks watching at home different images of Rebecca Dishman now and then. On the right is how she looked prior to being in court, prior to being arrested. She was posting pictures like this on Facebook. A little bit of a different look. Dr. Gary Brucato, we have about 15 seconds here. Does that indicate anything to you if she has a darker look?
Not necessarily. I mean, I do think that it's important to understand that a person like this probably has a very malleable identity, which is precisely what an offender would prey upon. And so what I think is you might look at two photos of an individual like that and say it's like looking at two different people, because the identity can be warped so much by a powerful, manipulative person.
All right. Big thank you, Janine Driver, Dr. Gary Brucato. This stuff is tough to deal with at times. Now, regardless of who you believe in this case, I mean, they're both in the house. That's clear. And from the testimony, they are both taking part in some of these deviant sexual acts. And then obviously the body stays there for months at a time. Nobody was saying anything about what happened to Jennifer Paxton until they got caught. That's the bottom line. They both did nothing about it. All right, folks, don't go anywhere. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues. I'm Vinnie Politan as we continue our investigation of a man named Sean Finnegan, his fiancee Rebecca Dishman, and the woman who was murdered, Jennifer Paxton. I want to remind you that some of this material, a lot of this material, is really difficult stuff. It is harsh. It is horrendous on many different levels. I just want to let you know up front, no children should be listening to this program right now. So if they are, please get them out of the room. Here's more of the story. It was a crime so horrific, so depraved, no one would think a human would be capable of it. But it happened. Jennifer Paxton was abducted, chained up, sexually abused, and tortured. She was then murdered. Two people were in the house with her, two people who pointed the finger at each other. Sean Finnegan and his 30-year younger fiancée, Rebecca Dishman, both implicated for this dark crime that has left the public wondering why anyone would do this to another human being. Jennifer Paxton suffered. She absolutely suffered, and at the moment that she was dying, she knew that she was going to die. This after some really deviant sexual behavior. And then, of course, the behavior continued after her death as well. I want you to take a listen to the testimony from the medical examiner, because it's an important part of this case. It's about suffering. It's about cruelty. And to really understand it, you have to realize the injuries and the torture that Jennifer Paxton suffered. Let's take a listen.
For the record, we're going to be using just push pins with red markers on them to where, when the doctor describes the first injury, she's going to go in order and then put a push pin where the location of the injury is and then describe it.
There was actually a similar injury that involved the left ear. And that part of the ear was actually absent. So there were a couple of areas that appeared like that a cutout was so large and substantial that part of the skin and subcutaneous tissue was not present, was missing. There was actually a couple of incised cuts that were actually subsequent to the nose being removed. So I put two different cuts here. So there were oblique, diagonal, deep cuts that went all the way to the bone. And then there was the incised wound that was There were a couple of incised wounds on the body that show some viral reaction, and this is one that was in the area of the ligature to the left of the midline. It was a relatively deep wound. It went all the way to the trachea. It did not penetrate into the trachea, but it went through all the muscle, skin, subcutaneous tissue, muscle, all the way to the trachea, and that's the wound actually that was surrounded with hemorrhage. We have a very large area on the shoulder that is a cutout, and it didn't show any viral reaction. And then similar to that, actually right below that, there was a larger area. And that larger area was very irregular. I call those areas and cutouts and sliced injuries with kind of geographic pattern. And then also there is what is described as a laceration scab wound on the medial aspect of the elbow. So that definitely looked like a deeper cut, and it's on the inside medial aspect, on the inside of the elbow, and involved the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and that's actually the one that did have hemorrhage around it. So that appeared to be more like an antemortem, meaning there's some circulation happening with this wound. One thing about the chest, all of these, they're around the breast, kind of clavicle, sternum, mid-chest, left breast. There are kind of multiple, so this doesn't mean there's just one. It means like a cluster of little wounds all kind of grouped together. And the ligature was relatively narrow. Could it be rope, could it be shoelace, could be anything that is relatively narrow like that. It was tightly applied to abrade the skin, because after freezing, all of that skin became, in the ligature furrow, became really dark brown, dark black-brown. And then on the back, it ran mostly, very, very slightly upward, but mostly horizontal, which is pretty typical for strangulation versus hanging, where it's the upward pattern. And then interruption pattern in the back means that there was either device that was used to kind of tighten it. Unlike the stab wounds or sharp force injury, there is a relatively small amount of hemorrhage around them. The blunt force trauma is associated with the bigger bruise underneath. Bruise, or in this report, actually, we can use, or you can see terms bruise or contusion or ecchymosis. That pretty much applies to the blunt force trauma.
And we have black markers to note each injury blunt force wise.
And then make sure that I have not skipped anything, is the distal forearm, ventromedial aspect. And then there's the broad area of ecchymosis on the right hand. Make sure that I have that correctly. Ventromedial distal forearm. And then the left hand actually had kind of confluent bruising. Now, anything that is on the back of the hand, frequently in my reports, I would say that the forearms and hands are consistent with the defense injuries.
All those injuries, all those wounds that you see marked on that mannequin actually happened. Some before she died, some after she died. Jennifer Paxton was absolutely tortured, which brings me to my next question in this case, and I think it's another important question to get to the reality of what happened here. How much did Jennifer Paxton suffer? You look at that mannequin and you try to imagine it, and then you hope and you pray that it didn't take that long, that she didn't suffer that much, but I don't know if that's the answer. I want to bring in my experts joining me, clinical and forensic psychologist, researcher, expert on violent crime, author of the book, The New Evil, Dr. Gary Brucato. Also with us, distinguished scholar of applied forensics, professor of forensics at Jacksonville State University, and host of the very popular Body Bags podcast, Joseph Scott Morgan, also with us. Joseph, I'll begin with you. Looking at that mannequin, it's not easy, but it's the reality of the final days of Jennifer Paxton's life. Did she suffer? How much did she suffer?
Yes. Yeah, she suffered intensely. Vin, you know, the physician, the forensic pathologist, was talking about that some of these insults, particularly sharp force insults, were absent hemorrhage, but those that she did annotate there relative to the ecchymosis that she was referring to, she felt every one of those, Vin. And they're in various degrees of severity. One of the kind of interesting things was that when reading through the documents is that some of these injuries are sustained and they're haphazard. So it's almost randomizing these injuries. Now, for every one of those black indicators that they have on the mannequin, those are in fact contusions, bruises, or as the doctor mentioned, ecchymosis. Those are things that were sustained, that she did feel. And, you know, this is kind of an event that's cumulative over a period of time. I can only imagine, and I you know, again, can only imagine the horror, but she had to suspect that her end was at hand. Probably one of the more striking things is the depth of this ligature. They're talking about using a shoelace. If we think back to those images that many people have seen of Jean Bonnet with those deep furrowed marks on her neck, that's what you're talking about, because it's about that width with a shoelace. Just remember, with a ligature, the more narrow, the deeper the furrow will be. If it was a belt, it'd be very wide and kind of shallow, but with a shoelace in particular, it would have been very deep, very painful. Her breath would have slipped away and she would have been aware of it.
Dr. Gary Brucato, was that the point of this, to make her suffer? That's why she lingered for days inside that home and they just didn't take her life right in the beginning?
Whatever it is that was going on here, the center of it, in some way that is extremely difficult for the average person to understand, is about the playing out of a psychosexual fantasy. For some people, the psychosexual fantasy is about the taking of a person's life simply as the assertion of control, domination, or power over another person. And for some people, it's about a kind of exquisite torture where the idea is to enjoy every moment of a person's suffering. For some people, there's a kind of experimentation, like a kid in a candy shop, where you say, what happens if I do this to this part of a person? Where the intellectual curiosity figures into it. Whatever was going on here, the center of it was some deeply, deeply perverse sexual fantasy life. And what makes this so especially horrendous, despite how many cases of this kind of thing I deal with and I'm aware of, is that this victim was essentially a surrogate for some other person in this individual's life, probably a female, who was loathed, despised, against whom this individual feels the need to level the playing field. And so this innocent person is suffering exquisitely to compensate for what it is that that individual feels towards someone else.
Wow.
And that's what makes this so particularly horrendous.
Wow. I want to take a listen to Rebecca Dishman describing the last moments of Jennifer Paxton's life and what she was doing. Take a listen.
Did she ever tell Mr. Finnegan she needed to leave or wanted to leave?
Yes.
What was his reaction?
He told her that as he was killing her, that she wasn't going anywhere, that she was going to die.
So when you say he said he told her, you're going to die?
Yes.
What did she do?
She started crying.
And what did he do?
He just kicked her and spat on her. And he was straddled over her, strangling her with a shoestring, and told me to help him. And I just shut down and sat on the bed and just gave up, essentially.
How long did this go on?
For hours.
Could you describe for us specifically what was going on in the course, if you say this was hours?
He would start and stop, like take breaks in between. She was taking her last breath, and I got on my hands and knees and told her goodbye because I knew she was dying. And he came back inside and slapped me across the face.
Joseph Scott Morgan, starting and stopping over the course of hours, this strangulation, what is she going through?
Well, she's heading into shock, and your body will begin to shut down after a period of time, particularly during this level of trauma. and whatever is going on internally with her, if there's indwelling internal blood loss at this point in time, that's also playing a factor here. And, one part of me wants to think that maybe there was some merciful numbness, if you will, to these final moments in her life. But as this witness is talking about this, she's seeing this kind of slipping away, if you will. She's bearing witness to this. And this is, I think, in my opinion at least, this fits in with the number of injuries she has sustained. She would be heading into shock, possibly into coma at this moment in time, until finally, when this ligature is finally applied in that one fatal moment, her life just kind of ebbed out of her. But this was a long, long, laborious event that she would have suffered for every moment that she was there.
My guests are staying with us, still to come. Could this be the only victim?
This woman had been defiled, beaten, stabbed, raped, and choked. And he slept 8 feet from her for 8 months.
One of the most successful true crime TV shows ever.
This is crazy.
Now has a new home on America's original true crime obsession, 48 Hours, on Court TV. Coming up next on Court TV.
Was a reporter brutally murdered for digging too deep?
Once all the evidence comes out, it'll be clear as day.
Will Robert Tellez go from elected official to convicted killer?
The investigative reporter murder trial, weekday mornings on Court TV.
When you say you didn't expect it to be, as harsh or as aggressive, what kind of things would he do then as punishment?
Anywhere from putting me in a dog cage and urinating on me and climaxing, defecating on me, chaining me up with a dog chain, using box cutters on me, sodomizing me, using torch ladders on me, just very violent punishments.
The behavior being described beyond disturbing, and that was behavior that was targeted to his co-defendant, who's admitted her guilt, her part in all of this. I want you to take a listen to the prosecutor, because he really did a great job of sort of summarizing the essence of this crime, of this attack, of this torture.
This guy was caught red-handed. Red-handed. You probably don't think about that phrase, but it comes from like 15th century. Red-handed meant that the person's hand actually was full of blood, and it was red, because they just committed the homicide. He was caught red-handed with a woman's body that this had been done to. This woman had been defiled, beaten, stabbed, raped, and choked. And he slept 8 feet from her for 8 months. This woman in his freezer was his trophy. That's what she was. That's why they kept her.
The level of depravity here, off the scales. And you think about someone actually did this. It was actually done. This isn't a story. This isn't made up. This isn't a theory. Literally caught red-handed with all of this inside the home. So that brings me to my next question. Another really important one. Could this be the only victim? The first time that this happened at the hands of Sean Finnegan, Rebecca Dishman? Let me bring back in my guests, Gary Brucato, Dr. Gary Brucato, Joseph Scott Morgan. Dr. Gary Brucato, what are your thoughts there? Could this be the only victim?
Well, it's interesting that you talked about this level of depravity being off the scale, because in my own work, I use a scale to rank depravity and categorize offenders. And people that fall into the category that this guy seems to fall into never really have one victim. They generally begin around late 20s, about 26, 27 years old, and proceed from there. And the idea is that they have generally a string of victims. It would be very peculiar for somebody in his mid-50s to suddenly go out and enact an intense, violent, psychosexual fantasy with a person who's been lured with a cover story, incapacitated, blitz style, and meticulously tortured, and to even have a confidant who's participating. That suggests somebody who has honed a way of doing this over time. The idea is what you'll probably see as the story unfolds, if he's anything like these other kinds of guys, is that there's been a dabbling elsewhere with victims of different types, attempts at the very least to lure people, and all kinds of relationships in which people have been treated in the most absolutely horrendous, awful ways. This guy is completely callous, and you don't become like that in your mid-50s.
Joseph Scott Morgan, what do investigators do?
Well, the first thing they're going to need to do is, and I hope that this has already been done, is this area in particular that he had identified as a safe place in order to perpetrate these crimes has been thoroughly, and I mean thoroughly, from stem to stern, searched for foreign DNA. Now, there are some indications that there were some unidentified bits of DNA on certain items that were there. I'd be curious for them to be able to follow up relative to that when we begin to think about missing persons and that sort of thing. Maybe if they could do some phenotyping or something like this. And also any of his prior history of interactions with people. Gary makes a very solid point here, in talking about that he may not have gone full throttle into this like he did in this case, but he's at least dabbled in it perhaps. You have to understand, Vin, that in a case like this, there's been a lot of planning going into this. He actually has a toolkit in order to facilitate these things, to actually visualize these and actualize them moving forward. And I would be surprised if he had not had some experience with torture in the past.
This is a difficult subject to handle. From my perspective, I'm so glad that both of you were with us to give some insight, some analysis. I think it's an important story. I know it's awfully dark, but it actually happened. So we have to handle it, deal with it, hopefully learn from it. Dr. Gary Brucato, thank you so much. Joseph Scott Morgan, thank you as well. I'm sure we'll see you again down the road. What can I say? This is the worst in human conduct that we see. We see it in the movies, and we understand it's a movie, but this was reality. And, they chose a victim that no one was looking for, and they might have gotten away with it, but they didn't. And thank God a light has been shined on this case and on these two people, because the best news is that they've been identified and they now are being held responsible for their actions. No more future victims from them. Our system will handle it. I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.